begin with some breaking news coming in from the West Asian region. Hamas has begun handing over the hostages from Gaza. The first 7 of the 20 surviving Israeli hostages have been released so far. That is the information, the latest information that we know right now. In Tel Aviv, meanwhile, hundreds of people have been gathered on the hostages square. They have erupted in joy as the news broke of the first releases. Now, Hamas seized 251 hostages on October 7, 2023, during an unprecedented attack on Israel. But all but 47 of the hostages were freed in earlier truces. Only 20 of these are expected to be alive. Hamas will also release the remains of the others. Israel has also begun releasing around 2,000 detainees, Palestinian detainees, in exchange. Among the prisoners to be released, 250 are security detainees, including many convicted of killing Israelis. About 1,700 were detained by the Israeli army in Gaza during the war. Now, that is the latest that we know. Now, again, for the people just joining in, 7 Israeli hostages have been freed in Gaza and are now with the Israeli military. And there were loud cheers in Hostages Square as the news of the release emerged. Now, earlier, Hamas did release a list of 20 living hostages being freed today. In exchange for the hostages, Israel will be releasing 250 Palestinian prisoners and more than 1,700 detainees. Now, there were videos that showed helicopters preparing to receive hostages after the release. Now, these are the visuals from Tel Aviv of people cheering for the hostages that will be released. Now, what we know is Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump, is watching the release stream on his Air Force One. Now, these are visuals coming in from Tel Aviv that you see. Friends, families of hostages are watching. And to discuss more, we're now being joined live by Jane Kinmont from London. She is the CEO of United Nations Association UK. Thank you so much for joining on the broadcast. What we know is that there has been the beginning of the release of hostages. So far, 7 have been released. First of all, your reaction on that?
So this is a momentous day, and Donald Trump will be getting a hero's welcome, really, in Israel for making this happen and for giving families relief after so long. But at the same time, there is an undercurrent of criticism. Back in January, there was a ceasefire that would have seen all the hostages released, but it fell apart largely due to changing political calculations on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu. So while Israelis are welcoming Trump's role, there's a lot of criticism of their own prime minister for not doing this deal earlier. And there may be elections in Israel quite soon. Netanyahu will be hoping to come to victory with the hostages coming home, but his rivals will be saying much of the suffering could have been prevented sooner.
Absolutely. And now what we know is the next step, probably after the release, would be the summit that we know is going to take place in Egypt. What we know is, of course, there are several countries that are taking part in this, including UK. So what are the plans, or what are the expectations from this meeting where we know that not Iran is taking part in it, nor Israel. What we know is ally US is taking part in that meeting. What is your reaction to that, and what are we expecting from this meet?
At the end of the day, it seems to me this is a recognition that a lot of countries are going to have to be involved in bringing this ceasefire towards anything that looks like greater peace and stability. So that's a good thing. Donald Trump and the US cannot do this alone. The ceasefire is really the first stage, but there are many, many things that still need to be worked out, including the future government of Gaza, whether and how that will lead to the state that the Palestinians want and which most countries recognise they have a right to, and also issues about international forces, perhaps a peacekeeping force. The Trump plan envisages a stabilisation force, but it's very low on detail. So one of the issues they'll talk about is who might put troops in. What would their mandate be? Would they be trying to forcibly disarm Hamas? Is there a risk of a civil war in Gaza that other countries need to help prevent? And then there's the reconstruction.
Absolutely, and that's a very important point that you put out. We don't know if it's going to be a civil war because we don't know what's going to happen next after this hostage release. Hamas, of course, we are looking if they will go for a disarmament. UK have stood for a two-state solution. What kind of role do you think Western countries will be playing in the meet in Egypt?
So, I mean, with the UK role, there's been an interesting diplomatic back and forth over the last 24 hours, because here in the UK, one of the government ministers was on TV yesterday. We have a lot of politics programmes on Sundays, and she said the UK has played an important role behind the scenes in the ceasefire deal. She was then slapped down by the American ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who said she is delusional. The UK played no role. But this morning, I wake up to see that Steve Witkoff, the US peace envoy, has praised the UK for having a vital role and singled out its national security advisor for playing a particularly important part. So that's quite interesting. And here in Europe, there's always a debate. Are we relevant? Do we actually have influence where the US seems to be so central? But the UK has been involved in this conflict since its inception. Some in the region would say that part of it is the UK's fault for leaving its empire in the Middle East without resolving the issue of a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli one. So there is a feeling here in the UK among many that there's a responsibility to try to help and to try to bring about a state of Palestine in reality as well as in the political recognition.
Right, and also, may I also bring in Hamas now? I don't want to seem human here, but the hostages were one sticking point that Hamas did have. As of now, we have Hamas saying, and I'll just read out a statement by Al-Qassam Brigades. They say the agreement reached is the fruit of steadfastness of our people and the resilience of their resistant fighters. We declare a commitment to the agreement reached and its associated timetables. They're committed to this, but how do you imagine what would Hamas look like after this hostages first phase is over?
I think the situation on the ground is going to be extremely messy. Hamas exists both in Gaza and in the West Bank and internationally. And we're very often hearing their leaders speak from capitals around the Arab world, especially Doha. And of course, they will want to claim that they have won. And that they have made progress for the Palestinian cause. But on the ground, as we can see, Gaza is completely shattered. So I think it's really questionable how much support and legitimacy they will still have there after the people there have suffered so very, very much over the past 2 years.
True, and there tends to be, we see a sense of victory from both Hamas and Netanyahu, just before this hostage release happened, just a few hours, he just said that, still we were looking at Hamas, they might be rearming. There seems to be a sense of, fragility in this whole process of hostage release. We know 7 are released. We just need to see how it goes forward, of course, staying positive. But how much of a fragile this phase is?
I think it is very fragile. I think there will certainly be people in Hamas who want to resume a war against Israel, even if that's not soon. And there are certainly people in the Israeli government who are saying almost openly, once we get the hostages out, we'll go back in, we'll never end this war. So the question really is, can those people be outnumbered and perhaps unseated by a wider coalition of people in their societies who really do want this war to end? Because we can see that the Israeli public has really turned against this war. We can see that the Palestinians desperately need a period of calm and rebuilding, and that there is a desire to make this ceasefire stick. But it may depend on changes of leadership on both sides as well.